Hi, welcome back to our Ask the Expert series. Today we're on location at Landsel Title, and I'm here with Sarah Pollyea. She is General Counsel and Commercial Underwriting Counsel with Landsel Title. Today we're discussing closing costs for commercial transactions. Sarah, thank you so much, first of all, for agreeing to let me interview you.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah. Can you provide just kind of a general overview of what commercial closing costs typically include?
Yeah. So they typically include the same types of closing costs that residential deals have, like escrow fees and title search fees, commitment fees, recording fees, kind of things like that. But they also might include additional fees, like perhaps an underwriting fee or maybe some legal document preparation fees that might be a little bit higher than on the residential side, mainly just because a lot of the documents that are prepared are a little bit more complex. And then just in general, a lot of these fees will be a little bit higher than on the residential side for the same reason, just because some of the deals are more complex. So we do charge higher fees most of the time.
Okay. So because of that, do you, when you're estimating closing costs, how are you doing that? Especially because you just said like sometimes they are a little bit more complex.
Yeah. So I don't really like to make generalizations as to closing costs on commercial deals. So I like to kind of assess them on a case-by-case basis. And really what I look at is the complexity of the transaction and then the size of the property. Because the size of the property is going to directly impact what our search fees would be. And then the complexity of the transaction will impact what our escrow fees might be or what our underwriting fees might be. And basically just kind of looking at what we need to do to determine what our fees are going to be.
Okay. Is that also kind of why closing costs maybe vary? Or can you maybe talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's kind of just based on the complexity and on the type of transaction. I'll give you an example, like on a drop and swap or a 1031 exchange where there's seller financing. There might be higher costs just for preparation fees and underwriting fees than just a regular purchase and sale with commercial financing. So it kind of just depends on what we're doing in that transaction.
Okay, awesome. So let's say that I am a client and I'm ready to close. What are some things that I should prepare for in the closing process and then also when I'm managing the costs?
Yeah. I mean, I always ask people to be prepared to provide as much detail as possible about the transaction that's going to be occurring. Because at that point, if you do that, your quote's going to be a lot more accurate than if you just provide me with general information. Typically, when I do quote deals, I always tell people that we do reserve the right to revise the closing costs if the structure of the deal changes, which is sometimes typical in commercial transactions where you start out with a deal going a certain way and then maybe the financing changes or the type of the deal changes. So we typically do tell people at the beginning of the transaction when we quote fees that these fees are subject to change based on these conditions that might occur.
That's always good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any like legal aspects of the transaction that can impact closing costs?
Yeah. I mean, the more legal documents we're asked to provide, the higher those costs will be. And I actually prepare and provide legal documents through my law firm, Sarah Pollyea Law, LLC, which I do in conjunction with Landsel Title as I'm processing the deals. But if we're asked to prepare, like, for example, seller financing documents or drop and swap documents, or even multiple deeds, and some of those legal fees are going to be higher. And those are a little bit easier to quote. If I know what's going on in the transaction, I can usually provide a pretty accurate quote as to how much those particular documents would cost to prepare.
Okay. What about like regulations or compliance issues? Is there anything that clients need to be aware of within like regards to that?
Yeah. I mean, commercial deals are not subject to the same regulations as residential deals. Now, obviously, the Department of Insurance is going to regulate the premium that we can charge on a policy the same way that they would do so on a residential deal. Also with the endorsements as well, that's state regulated. But other than that, pretty much industry standards in the area are going to dictate how much we charge for the remaining items.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sitting down.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.